What the Funk is back. We've got Dave Levitt today. Got a beautiful sunny day here, end of May. I'm looking forward to taking a little bit of time off, heading with the family to Delaware tomorrow, see my wife's side of the family, get a little beach time, relax a little bit. Lots of travel. I mentioned on the last podcast that I did was in Europe, so spent time in London and Paris, which was fantastic. And then last week spent time in the London and Paris of the United States, Oklahoma City and Dallas. So, very, very complimentary in terms of rich history, kind of. But super happy and excited to have Dave Levitt. Dave, we've never actually met in person before, but I've been tangentially aware of you and your accomplishments in the oil and gas tech arena. Kirk Coburn referred to you as a legend, Levitt the legend. So had to have you on the podcast. And of course, kindred spirits with me. I've been in oil and gas, tech sales, marketing, all that stuff for about 16 and a half years. You've been in it for a minute. And really just kind of want to get to know you, let the audience get to know you, talk about some of your past. And I'll just sort of start it off, Dave, with the question I ask everybody. Who are you? Who is Dave Levitt?
Well, curious people want to know, apparently. Not a tremendous amount to say necessarily. I grew up in New England, Western Massachusetts, in a pre-Revolutionary War town that still has homes that was settled in the 1600s that have tunnels out to the Connecticut River with dungeons from this Revolutionary War. Paul Revere bells in the churches, that kind of old New England town.
Yeah.
It's called Long Meadow. Went to Syracuse University for newspaper journalism. Sadly, this was in the pre-ESPN era. I was a sports writer.
Nice.
Was already in several newspapers during high school. And Syracuse was the obvious choice for me.
Of course.
Unfortunately, upon graduation, I learned that the market space for journalism depended on people's commitment to being philanthropic. I got offered a job at the New York Times, and they offered me $8,300, and I thought that was for the year. For the summer. And they told me it was for the year, and I just laughed. They said, son, I used to hate when they did that. There's a line out there a mile long who will do this job for free. And I said, well, that may be the case, but it is now one person shorter because I just don't have that intrinsic reward viewpoint on needing to express myself in print for such a charitable amount of money. Yeah. So I didn't take the job. I decided to go on to grad school for an MBA at George Washington in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And my advisor there was on the board of directors of IBM. When I told him I wanted to get into sports management, and at the time, all the teams were family owned. And he said, are you intending to marry the owner's daughter? And I said, not that I know of. And he says, well, then you'll be selling season tickets your whole life. And is that what you want to do? He said, go into technology. It's about the boom. This was in 78, 79, 80, that kind of time frame. And I think that's the area you should go into. And he said, you're a real renegade. You got some talent, but you need discipline. Mm-hmm. So let me hook you up with IBM, and they'll teach you some discipline. So ultimately, I go on an interview, and for sales, and at the time there was no digital marketing, so marketing meant sales from a work standpoint, unless you wanted to be some staff marketing person, which was not my intention. They teach you in MBA school for marketing to be vice president of marketing. Yeah. You call Procter & Gamble, and guess what you find out? They already have one. Yeah. And they don't need a 25-year-old one. taking that person's place. So they send you into sales and tell you can't understand marketing until you've been in the marketplace. So I go in the interview with IBM and I come back and I said, Professor, I may need that kind of discipline, but I'm not mature enough to accept it. Where do people who flunk out of IBM go? And at the time, they were going to that super renegade company, Exxon. That's a joke. But they had an ill-fated office systems group. They had assembled a series of technology companies, combined them into what they called Exxon Office Systems to take on IBM and AT&T. And so it was all ex-IBM people who didn't like the superstructure of IBM. So it was a great experience, but one I outgrew fairly quickly. And so I had a friend who worked for the World Wrestling Federation, and they were looking for someone to write a magazine for them and organize that and bring it in-house, work for Vince McMahon. And I laughed. I thought it was silly. But one great thing about writing for a wrestling magazine, you can decide in June what happens in December.
Yeah, exactly.
They were still flirting with the notion of, is it entertainment or is it sports? And so they weren't really ready to commit to its entertainment. Yeah. So they were a very secretive company. And even still, they have a unlisted phone number. What multi-billion-dollar company has an unlisted phone number?
That's cool.
Vince is an interesting character, to say the least. But that was short-lived. Came back to Texas and got back in technology, and ultimately, did that for 40 plus years.
Wow.
Split between direct sales for companies such as Siebel and Datalogics and SAP, and then reinvented myself. When my daughter went off to college, I decided I wasn't done parenting. So I went into sales leadership and spent the last 15 years or so in sales leadership, first creating a business unit for oil and gas for Salesforce.com.
Yeah.
And then ultimately joining a startup called LiquidFrameworks, where we grew it almost 60 times over a period of 9 years and exited 3 times in that time period. So it was a good run, stepped off from that, watched TV for a year, and formed a partnership and created what we refer to as MOIC Partners, multiple uninvested capital, to help small software companies create more robust sales and marketing engines so that they can get a better multiple at exit. So it's been fun. We've been doing that for about 6 months.
That's awesome. Well, great story. And, you didn't know this about me. I'm a New England guy as well. Grew up in New Hampshire, went to Brandeis. Actually went to summer camp in Palmer, Massachusetts. You're probably one of the only people that's been on this podcast that actually knows where Palmer is.
Sure.
And my wife's cousin is also from Longmeadow. His last name is Levitt, which is also kind of interesting.
What's his first name?
Rob.
Does he have a brother, Jeff?
I don't think so. I think he's got sisters, no brothers, though.
Oh, and I knew an Amy Levitt and her sister Cindy, but I'm a lot older than you, so it's anyone's guess. But we're going to Ogunquit soon, nice. So we spend the summer in New England, and so we're leaving next Wednesday.
I mean, that's the move if you live in Houston, right? Get out for the summer.
Absolutely.
No, this is good. And of course, Syracuse, right? I wanted to get into sports reporting, sports writing too, right? That would be the move. But like you said, 8,300 in New York City, whenever this was 30, 40 years ago, wouldn't get you very far. I don't think 8,300 a year would get you very far during Revolutionary War times in New York City.
Right.
So
I'd be better off being a migrant
Um, so you,
economically.
yeah, right. So yeah, a lot to unpack here, and obviously a lot that I like. So I want to talk about technology in the late '70s and early '80s. Like I really started my career in technology and sales, and day one on the job, you mentioned Salesforce. I worked at a company called Left Hand Networks here in Boulder. And first day on the job, literally, they gave me a couple scripts and they said, here's a site called salesforce.com, and you're going to log in here and you're going to record all of your tasks, and you're going to send us reports at the end of every day, so we can know what you do. So day one, I was given access to a CRM. The internet was already kind of a thing, and wasn't challenging for me to pick things up. Right, here's your script. This is where you record it. Go get it. What was it like though in the late '70s, early '80s when you're going out and selling tech? Like, were you recording stuff by hand? Were you using computer? Was there internal internet? Like, what was that? I'm trying to think about what was that like?
Well, it was pre-internet for one. It's pre-email for two. And so communication was really, and it's really pre-cell phone
Yeah,
at that point. So technology consisted of standalone word processors, um, fax machines, and memory typewriters, mainframe computers. What is now the cloud was then time sharing. So it's
yeah,
sort of gone full circle. And then the emergence of the PC in the early 80s, um, changed a lot around technology, and then networking and client server, and the rest is sort of history into the cloud around the year 2000, the internet emergence.
so you were probably making a ton of phone calls. Did you ever make any phone calls like from a phone booth type of thing, like a sales call from a phone booth because you had to get a hold of somebody and you were lost getting to a meeting or something? Like, what was it like?
Constantly, absolutely. I could tell you where every phone booth was in the east side of Houston. It was unbelievable. It's a different era altogether. We would do, we'd use the technology to create regular mailers, not emailers,
Yeah,
but we'd send mailers, and then we'd follow up on the phone with those mailers, and it was just Flintstones level technology.
totally.
Um, who knew we would end up, in the Jetsons style technology? But at the time, it was the Flintstones, pretty much. I didn't get my first cell phone until '88, and that was still pretty early.
Yeah.
Uh, I was very much an early adopter. It was a thick Motorola brick, and it was it was something, but it was better than nothing.
And it was expensive, I bet, to make calls, right? That's when it was like $1 a minute or something. So you had to be really judicious about making those calls.
Yeah, I'm not that judicious. I spent a lot on cell phone bills, and the companies would only reimburse a certain amount,
Right.
and there was that back and forth. But it was, it changed everything from an outside salesman's standpoint. Being able to call ahead, where are you? I'm late. It reduced a tremendous amount of stress, having that communications medium for sure. Um, it was great.
Interesting. Because on the flip side, I feel like my cell phone gives me a lot of stress. Ever since I got one, it's like, man, I don't know how I feel about people being able to reach me all the time. Like, when you just had a home phone and you were out. And then until you got home, right? And unless your parents called you or somebody called you, said you got a message or somebody called for you, you're out of pocket. And that was kind of nice. I can't hide now, man. My phone's blowing up right now.
Yeah, there's no place to hide. There's no doubt about it. But my mindset was, if 7-Eleven's open, I'm open.
Yeah,
And not having a phone, leave, and you need to communicate to someone for some reason, creates a tremendous amount of stress. and yes, we all have this reflex where we look at our phone 6 million times a minute. So we've gone kind of the other extreme.
Yeah.
But given the choice, I would rather that extreme of always available, always possibly available, and choosing when not to be
Yeah.
versus choosing when to be available.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. Um, so walk me through like a sales meeting, right? So it's 1981 and you're walking into somewhere in Houston, right? To take a sales meeting. Were you at that point showing things like PowerPoints, or are you writing things on a chalkboard? Like, how are you presenting stuff? And then, pursuant to that, how do you follow up? Because like, think about how I was trained, right? And sales reps are trained today. All right, you have the meeting, you need to follow up with an email. You follow up with a letter, like a handwritten note. What was your process like? What were meetings like? What was your follow up cadence like?
So let's just take the example. I was pretty early into the notion of sending real mailers every week and following up on them every week, to generate pipeline. And so you'd follow up on a phone, you'd set meeting times, you'd go out there. Um, I didn't do a lot of letter follow ups. Maybe if they bought something, I would send a card or something. But generally, you follow up by phone.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as PowerPoint. Um, uh, if I needed to do a presentation of some sort, it would be an overhead projector
Nice.
with transparencies, or would do a live demo in front of people, no way to project.
Yeah. They all have to
Um,
huddle around.
right. It's sort of a now you see it, now you don't thing. And if it was a fax machine demo, I'd have two fax machines and I'd fax from one to the other,
Amazing.
type of thing, just to make the point. Um, but, totally different environment, obviously. But I did get some good training in terms of understanding how to interact with people face to face, how to have a good cadence,
Yeah.
how to, so all the discipline I rejected when when I was in front of those folks at IBM, I was more or less adopting. It just I was doing it on my time frame instead of their time frame. If I'd been a little more mature, or had a little better guidance, or had a decent mentor, I probably would have taken that IBM job
Yeah.
and be better off for it. Um, but that's the way they operated too. Except they did a lot of face-to-face cold calling. Like you're the Avon lady.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't do much of that. I thought return on effort was too low, and it just didn't feel like getting doors slammed in my face by receptionists all day long.
Yeah. Like I think, I don't know. I take a lot of pride in my ability to be an empathetic salesperson. And I always think about, okay, what would the other person want? And I feel like the last thing they'd want is me showing up unannounced to their office wearing a suit,
Right.
ready to meet with them. It's like, oh God, this guy. Why is this guy here?
Well,
Another
well,
sales
that's
guy.
why
Get out of here.
that's why it was sort of unusual to send the letter in advance, or now send an email in advance, because the people aren't just sitting around waiting for you to come by. You
Totally.
know, whatever you call, they're doing something else.
Yeah.
So it's automatically an interruption.
Yeah. Yeah. Leave me alone. So I want to talk about your evolution, right? Obviously going from sort of more old school to now new school tactics, and eventually MOIC Partners. But I also want to talk about CRM. So the advent of CRM, using CRM, what were the initial tools that you used? Were they just when you were given a PC? You mentioned Siebel. Did you have CRM, and was it kind of similar to how people track their uh, logging activities and opportunity pipeline as it is today?
No, not really. Back then, CRM was more like contact management. Keeping almost a electronic Rolodex of sorts.
Yeah.
But then I worked for Siebel, and Siebel was the pioneer of CRM. Tom Siebel and Mark Benioff had worked together at Oracle. Tom left, formed Siebel Systems. They were the first CRM system for corporations and to embrace multi-level, multi-channel CRM. Email, phone, e-commerce. All the different channels in one integrated system, call centers.
Sure.
And so I worked there 6 years, and it was definitely trailblazing because companies, the sales reps didn't want it because they thought Big Brother was watching.
Sure.
Management was too lazy to use it because it required their involvement. They couldn't just call the rep and ask, So that hurt adoption. And so if neither side wants it, the only people who want it are the senior executives.
Right.
And so the big challenge wasn't selling senior executives. That was relatively easy. The hard part was getting people to use it and see what's in it for them at all levels, at the sales rep level, at the management, mid-management level. At the executive level, it's obvious, and they see it instantly. But it's a change management project disguised as a technology project.
Right.
And the sales reps feel like all that data is theirs. They don't feel like it's the company's. Back then, they did not accept that the contacts were the company's contacts. They felt that was their leverage with the company, that they own the customer relationship and you can't have it. So it was definitely trailblazing in that era of right around 2000, the Siebel era, before Salesforce came in.
And now we've got all different kinds.
Yeah, Mark was an investor in Siebel because he and Tom were friends, and he used that money that he made at Siebel Systems, many millions from that stock. It was a prolific stock at the time, to start Salesforce.com. And there are, Siebel even had an online tool called Sales.com that Tom was not interested in selling, Tom Siebel, because he thought that it could cannibalize his on-premise, license business. And Mark, whether or not he used Sales.com or created his own, he liked the idea and changed. It was a big proponent and really a trailblazer of his own in cloud computing. And so going from a CRM standpoint, from Siebel, who was the market leader by a long shot, then I helped SAP get more serious about CRM as part of a special SWAT team for the senior leadership, and then went to Salesforce.com and started their business in energy, which they didn't understand at all, and frankly never really liked because they're California oriented.
Right. And now they've got a $200-something million line of business in energy, so they probably do like it.
No, they don't. They tolerate it. They don't. They don't. They don't. But they want the revenue. But it's not something. I mean, they've after I left, they at some point they disbanded the energy group. Then they put it back together. Then they disbanded it again. So I mean, the political views inside Salesforce conflict with market needs in certain industries, and it creates conflict inside a company like Salesforce.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that perspective. Want to talk about LiquidFrameworks for a little bit. So LiquidFrameworks, obviously a great story. I think anybody would enjoy 60x growth and 3 exits. But Liquid Frameworks first hit my radar probably 2013, 2014. I was selling iPad based field data capture to pumpers, to lease operators, to production foremen in oil and gas for Seven Lakes. And Liquid Frameworks was really this, as I saw it, a very versatile, malleable mobile platform. So tell me a little bit about that kind of whole run. Like, where did the idea of Liquid Frameworks come from? How did it evolve? And then how did you end up having such an amazing run that led to amazing growth and exits?
Well, let's go back to Salesforce for a second.
Sure.
Mark is a brilliant guy as it relates to vision, technology vision. And he recognized relatively early that their secret sauce was not the CRM system. Their secret sauce was the development tools used to create the CRM system. CRM just happened to be what they knew.
Interesting.
So they decoupled the application, opportunity management, if you want, CRM, from the development platform, rebranded the platform, Force.com, and created an app store, the
Yep.
original app store. In
Yeah.
fact, when Apple created its app store, it violated Salesforce's patent or trademark. And Mark, who was friends with Steve Jobs, this, as the story goes, gave Steve the brand of App Store and then created the App Exchange for Salesforce.
Yes.
So they created an ecosystem where other vendors could create vertical applications where Salesforce did not have a direct solution. And there were hundreds of them. Some of
Yep.
them were horizontal, some were vertical. It just depended. It created ultimately $1 billion business for Salesforce, and also created sort of a minor league system for them to see what markets were happening, what were growing, where do they want to invest themselves, who do they want to buy, that kind of thing. So I was familiar with the challenge that Liquid Frameworks was trying to address, having sold CRM into oil and gas for Siebel, for SAP. And I knew that for every sales rep, they had many times over more crew supervisors.
Yep.
And those crew supervisors needed to be away from the internet virtually the entire time. There are not Starbucks next to a well site, as you know. So there's no
Absolutely.
internet connectivity and offshore the good news about oil wells is is that they're not muddling up downtown locations. The bad
Right.
news from a convenience standpoint, they're not in downtown locations, right?
Except for LA.
They are, out there.
Yeah.
And so there's no internet. So the people, when they want to record, ticket information, they had to do it, on a napkin, or they would do it in Excel, or, whatever means they did, but it wasn't electronically into an integrated system. So I was familiar with this problem, and I knew no one had a solution for it out of the big brands. Microsoft had nothing. Siebel tried. I did a deal with the largest oil field service company in the world globally, and for sales and sales operations, sales order management. And when it came time for them to exercise their option for field service,
Mm-hmm.
they pressed the synchronization button, and it took 6 hours.
Yeah.
You can only imagine their tolerance for that. So they wanted to develop what they called a lighter system than
Sure.
Siebel for field ticketing, and they cleverly called it Field Ticket Light.
Nice.
So you fast forward 12 years, and I'm approached by a private equity firm, and that managing partner is now my partner at MOIC, Chip Davis,
Okay.
and he said to me, Dave, he had tried to recruit me for other portfolio companies of his, and I was stayed pretty much a big company guy over the prior, they're at least mid companies. Siebel was about 500 million when I joined, 2 billion when I left. SAP was about 500 million when I got there, 3 billion when I left the first time, and uh, Salesforce was 300 million when I got there and 4 billion when I left. So I was used to a certain size company with a certain trajectory. And he said to me, Dave, look, this is everything made for you. It's CRM, it's oil patch,
Yep.
and their office is a mile from your house. And I said, Chip, you got 2 out of 3. He said, what did we miss? I said, at Salesforce, I office out of my home. Sounds like a grueling commute. So he said, meet the founder. Maybe you'll like him, and you guys will hit it off, and you'll want to do it. Because Salesforce at the time was getting awfully big and bureaucratic, and changing the way they were doing things in a way that lacked some alignment with me.
Sure.
And so I was vulnerable for a change. And so I met the founder. His name is Travis Parigi, a brilliant guy, has an incredible blend of charisma, smarts, technological sophistication, really an amazing person. And I meet him and I say, so, tell me about your company. And he tells me about field ticketing and how we supported Schlumberger's effort to develop a field ticketing system. And we realized, so you're the one who cost me 40,000 users at Siebel
Nice.
because you were involved in that development. So I instantly understood what they did because I knew that business problem from my work at Siebel. And so I said, well, show me your product. And he shows it. And I said, it was developed in .NET. He was just transitioned to the cloud. And I looked at it and I said, look, I have good news and bad news. And he says, what's the good news? Good news is you don't need me to tell you this, you have a clear understanding of the business problem and have developed the way to address it. And because there's revenue leakage that's happening out in the field because the people collecting ticket information were not using a system. And they left things off. And if you don't bill for it, you don't collect. It was time, materials, work.
Yep.
So they got most of it right, but they might leave 5 or 6% off on $1 billion company. That's $50 million a year of just leaving dribbled by the side of the road. So he said, what could possibly be the bad news? The bad news is, I've come from Salesforce where the systems are really pretty. And this system, not so much. And he said, well, why don't you, let me show you what we were doing at Salesforce.
Yeah.
And I showed him some of the custom stuff that pre-sales people had done for some of our oil patch customers. And he says, that's all great, but Salesforce can't support offline to the degree that we need it. And our 70% of our users are offline 99% of the time.
Sure.
And I said, well, you're a really smart guy. When you figure it out, call me back. But I'm not selling this.
Yeah.
And so a couple of months go by. Houston Ventures was investing in this company. And so they wanted me to come in when that money was invested. They wanted to invest in sales, among other things, and help bolster the company grow. The revenue was about $500,000 in revenue, software revenue at the time. So it was very small in a very underserved market, totally unattended market, frankly.
Yeah.
At the time, this was, 2008. And so a couple months go by and he calls me back and said, I figured it out. And I said, okay, tell me more.
What do you got?
And he talked way over my head technically. not on purpose. He just, he was enthusiastic and he understood the technology in great detail. The long and short of it was he found another technology that ultimately got bought by Salesforce to synchronize with Salesforce. So we could do all the configuration in Salesforce and have it render in this non-Salesforce based application to be used offline. Okay. And he was so convinced. I said, okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
And so we started. It took about a year to hash out an OEM relationship with Salesforce and to rewrite the software into Salesforce. So we muddled along with that .NET product for almost a year. And we told customers who bought, and some big name companies did buy, and we told them we will migrate you to our new product when we do it. We'll do it at no charge. We'll if you commit to us now, we'll make that transition, help you with that transition.
Sure.
And that was a pretty successful approach, relatively speaking. And then the company really took off once we had the product baked into Salesforce. Salesforce didn't have anything at the time. They didn't have a field service product. They didn't have a sales quoting product. So our quote to cash filled a vertical need for them into their energy customer base.
Sure.
And they didn't have a competing product anyway. So we were very, very well received in the Salesforce community. Later on, somewhat less so when they bought companies in those spaces that we competed with. But, they adjusted somewhat reluctantly that we were an orthopedic surgeon and they were a general practitioner.
Sure.
They had a terrific system that could support a tremendous range of industries. We had a very specific system for a very specific set of processes.
Yep.
And some of them there accepted that and welcomed it and embraced it and sold around it, other Salesforce products around the center of the plate, if you will, and others fought it. But that was okay. We had a spectacular record competing with Salesforce, but being on the Salesforce platform helped us gain a trajectory that I don't think we would have gotten given the other development choices at the time. Today, maybe we would have chosen Salesforce, maybe we would have chosen Amazon, maybe we would have chosen HANA, Azure. Who knows what we would have chosen if then was now. But then there weren't that many good options. And Salesforce gave us a great way to get up quickly and help our customers get up quickly. And there were a lot of Salesforce CRM customers that I've been involved with in the oil patch that needed that field application. They knew it, we knew it. And so it was a really a good choice for us, I think, at the time, and a good marriage between LiquidFrameworks and Salesforce.
So that was exit one?
So the first exit took 6 years. The oil business has its ups and downs, as you know, and we rode through those. So it took a little longer for the first exit than I think any of us would have liked.
Sure.
We sold to a private equity firm called Luminate out of the West Coast.
Okay.
And that was a pretty successful exit. But Travis and I decided to stay. We stayed on and wanted to grow the company more. We didn't think we were finished. And then 3 years later, we sold it again, this time to a larger software company also in the Salesforce space called ServiceMax.
Yep.
And then ServiceMax got bought a year later by PTC out of Boston, which ironically if you want to go full circle
I
here, you're a
do.
Boston guy, so a New England guy. So I worked for Prime Computer for 6 years. It was based in Natick.
Yeah.
Prime bought a company called Computer Vision and became a large computer-aided design company, transitioning out of the mini computer space. Ultimately, Parametric Technologies (PTC), uh, who rose to fame and fortune in the 90s, design with 3D computer-aided design, bought Computer Vision,
Yeah.
and as a result of Prime getting bought out, when I was there, they instituted some poison pills tactics to make it difficult to be acquired,
Mm.
and one of them was a pension plan for people like me who had been there for a long time. So here we are, for a long time later,
Yeah.
and and now PTC, which bought ServiceMax, which bought Liquid Frameworks, is paying me a pension.
That's hilarious.
You gotta love the symmetry.
That's incredible. Oh man. Well, no, that's and kudos to you for sticking around, right? I think a lot of founders or equity shareholders in these companies, right? You get acquired by private equity. All right, I'll stick around for however long they tell me they need me to stick around, but then I'm going to go do something else. But you guys had the wherewithal to say, you know what, we're not done. The market's still now coming to us, and frankly, the field ticketing space is still pretty open. So much paper in the field where there could be optimization. I'm curious to see how AI plays out there, but again, it takes a little bit of foresight and wherewithal to stick through that. So very
Well, and
cool.
in fairness, I'm still not that philanthropic, and they incented me significantly to stay
Stick around. Yeah,
and take to the next exit, because they had a hold period typically of about 4 to 5 years,
yeah.
and they were able to sell us in three. So they were delirious, and got a very good multiple for it. Um, and so it all worked out for everybody, but it wasn't totally uh, due to my commitment to see things through. Just to be fair.
Fine. I accept. Got a few more minutes here. I want to ask you some kind of bigger picture questions, right? So you've done a nice job sort of outlining your career, the full circle nature of it, spending time in CRM and in oil and gas, and how it all came together. But what advice would you give to younger Dave Levitt, the eager guy right out of Syracuse? Like what would you tell that guy as he starts to embark on his career?
Well, I think that I got really good mentorship along the way. I was able to, especially when I got to both, even at Exxon, there were people. The advice I would give is find people who care about you
Mm,
as a person, and the
love
technology
that.
business is a little bit of a crony business,
Agreed.
and so people travel in packs. So picking good mentors is really useful for everybody. I did a relatively good job of that, but where I stopped was that there was a point where I became kind of a high end mercenary.
Yeah.
Uh, Sales is addictive to a certain degree. The independence, the autonomy,
Yep.
the economics. It can be a great lifestyle. And I had been encouraged by several people that I respected a lot to go into management earlier. They thought that I had a coaching style, nurturing style that would transition from being control freak sales rep to empowering sales leader.
Hmm.
And I waited a long time to do that. And I think that I would have, if I was doing this over again, I would have given up some of that money and autonomy to get into leadership earlier. I built a nice coaching tree, if you will. A lot of
Yeah.
my former reps are VPs of sales. I get
Nice.
a lot of satisfaction out of that. And I think had I gone into it earlier, maybe I would have made even more money. And
Hmm.
from on the equity side, had I done leadership earlier, taken a few more chances versus staying with the more established companies. But uh, I didn't know that I would be an effective sales leader. You know, you don't know what you haven't done necessarily, and I knew I was effective as a high-end sales rep, and I
Yeah.
should have listened to that advice earlier, and I could have made a bigger impact, I think,
Yeah.
on others and other companies had I listened to that advice.
I like that a lot. And that's something that I think about too. It's sort of like I wanted to get into sales management sooner, but those opportunities just weren't there. So at some point I wrapped my mind around, well, I guess I'll just be a mercenary. I mean, that's sort of what the deal is. And that ultimately led to me starting my own company because you can have impact, right? If I'm doing consulting with 10 different companies and trying to help create revenue opportunities for them, then there's more impact that can be made. Like with MOIC, right? I think it's kind of cool what you guys are doing, but talk to me a little bit about your approach and why should some of these software companies that are growing but may lack some process expertise connections in the sales universe, why should they work with MOIC?
I think what happens with a lot of small software companies is that they're very effective early on selling to the founder's Rolodex of contacts
For sure.
and the early adopter market. Unfortunately, that early adopter market has a ceiling. And these companies, at one point, maybe it's at 5 million ARR, maybe it's at 10, they're going to hit a wall where
Yeah.
they've run out of founder contacts and their customers' contacts, and they're going to need to scale the business. And what worked for them selling to early adopters might not work for them selling to what's commonly referred to as the early majority.
Yep.
Uh, and what helped us at Liquid Frameworks, I think, was that I was used to selling to the majority. So
Yeah.
we came in with process. My playbook that I had used as a sales rep, that we used at Salesforce, that I was using at I brought it into Liquid Frameworks, could just as easily been used at Salesforce or SAP.
Sure.
It was a big company style process that was focused on ROI based selling
Sure.
and certain leading indicators that are going to drive deals and drive scale. And it's effective because larger companies are more scrutinizing and they don't just take the founder's word for it. I mean, they want to see a process. They want to know
Totally.
that you can be there to support them. So I think what we bring to the table is the experience associated with um, uh, breaking through the early adopter market to the early majority market,
Sure.
so that they can not hit that wall and have a better exit ultimately, a more robust company, and being able to have a better chance of skipping selling to a financial buyer
Yeah.
and selling straight to a strategic buyer, which pays more. And they look for different things, but giving them the chance to develop the metrics that are going to be attractive to a strategic buyer and not just to a financial buyer.
Yeah, I like that. And, to go back to something you said maybe 10 minutes ago, cronyism, right? You guys know people at this point, right? So you can connect the dots quickly for some of these guys. And as we know, that's a big deal. Um, Dave, where can people find you? Like if somebody wants to reach out to you, pick your brain. Obviously, you've got a wealth of information to offer, whether it's young salespeople or executives. And of course, looking to gain more business at MOIC. Where can people find you, Dave?
Well, we're trying to hide. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, email is dave at moicpartners.com.
Okay.
MOIC stands for Multiple Uninvested Capital. So it's designed to help people think about the exit. So Dave at MOICPartners.com. We have a website, MOIC Partners, very cleverly named. And on LinkedIn, we publish a blog, which I think is good reading for people in the sales business. It's getting some good traction. Excited to work with small SaaS, medium-sized SaaS companies who are trying to take the next leap.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. Well, Dave, I enjoyed this both on a personal and professional level. You've got a lot of um, stories, insight, history to share, and it seems like you made some of the right moves in your career, but I'm sure there were missteps as well. So appreciate
Absolutely.
you sharing your story, and thanks for coming on What the Funk, man.
You bet. Thanks for having me.